So in this lesson, we're going to look at working with this content section. So we've got a content section and we also have a sidebar area. And we can have a main container for all of this. So maybe that would be a good idea that we could set up a div that could be a main container. So we did throw around that idea earlier, but let's just create one here in case we need to utilize it. And I think that this will come in useful if we're trying to do anything that's for all of this contained area where we're using the A side, the side menu, and the content area together, the content section. So now we can use, this probably even saves us the trouble of having IDing that content. So I'm going to just update this to be main container. And we can actually do main container section if we wanted to. We'll just keep it at main container content to identify it. But there's a number of different ways that we can access this element at this point. So what we want to do, maybe we want to set a background color or a border around it so that we can identify the one that we're working with. So do that same thing where we're setting the border, and I'm also going to set a border for the side menu. So I believe we had called it sidebar. So let's do the same thing here so that we can identify them. And I usually like to do this when I'm working with them, just to make sure that I don't have any sections that are hanging over or that are not being utilized properly. So there we've got both of those sections. Now they've got borders around them, so they're really easy to identify and work with. And maybe for the sidebar, we're going to set a different background color, because typically with sidebars, you don't want it to take away from your main content, and we're going to stick with the grayscale. So I'm just going to pick a random gray color here so that we can easily identify that this is going to be our sidebar and menu area, and we might want to even change that when we resize it. So let's put in that divide there that we're going to set up a width of it. So let's go back and refer to our original design here and take a look at this. So maybe we're looking at probably about 66% to 33%, so 67-33 split on that. And these can of course be adjusted by depending on how much content you're expecting to have here. So I'm going to have a width of 67, and I'm going to float this one over to the left. And this is how we make separate columns in CSS, where we can float things to the left and then we float the other side to the right, and we're going to take up 33%. So let's take a look at this now and refresh it, and we can see that now we're taking up that. So there is a little bit of an overlap because we do have those borders in there. So maybe we can set this to 32%. So that it does fall into place there. And maybe even we still want to have a little bit of spacing between them as well. So this is all stuff that we could work in within our styling, and just to make sure that things are working out properly. And we see that that footer is sitting there at the bottom. Going to get rid of this so that we can identify the two content sections. We see that this footer is sitting here at the bottom, so this is something that we should take care of as well, just to break apart where that footer is sitting. So this is going to be footer, and to clear the two floats, since we floated left, since we floated right, now this one is automatically coming into line wherever there's spacing, and what we want to do is we want to actually clear both. And we want to give this one a width of 100%, so it's not getting crunched in there, and it actually sits where we want it to sit. And we can also, even here, we can add in a border so we can identify it later on when we want to work with it. So this is our website so far. You can shrink it down, and it's looking like it's getting more presented, and the content is presenting itself really nicely, fitting in. So one of the things that we need to do is with content, we should add in some padding because I don't really like it that the text is sitting there right over to the left hand side. So even though we're going to be removing this border, this is why I do include the borders, because you do want to make sure that whenever we're shrinking it down, that we are working with these borders properly. So we do have a little bit of a margin there, but I usually like to add in some additional padding into the spacing of the text and how it's being presented, and even at the top and the bottom. So maybe we could just do 10 pixels all around and see what that looks like. So this gives us a little bit more spacing, but now we've actually bumped this over because we've expanded the size. So let's update this. We can do it either two ways. We can adjust our width, or we can set the padding to be 0 and even set this padding, and then our padding on the left hand side, this is where we could add in 10 pixels. So let's refresh that and take a look at how this is going to look. So we see that now they're both back to where they were originally aligned, and now we can work with it that we've got some spacing here around the text as well, and we are going to get rid of this border so that this is aligning fairly nicely within our design model. So in the next lesson, we're going to apply some additional tweaks to the content, and we're also going to look at working with the footer and making some updates to that. So that's all coming up in the next set of lessons.